Now that we've learned about Yalom's 11 therapeutic factors, we're going to spend a little bit of time delving into a couple that he places special emphasis on, the first being interpersonal learning. Now, with interpersonal learning, I want to talk first about the role of social environment in development and behavior. I think culturally in Western society, we are taught that we are individuals, that we're not very influenced by the people around us. I think actually that we're social animals, that we are very influenced by the people around us. Stack Sullivan believed this deeply. He said, this is his quote, human beings have always lived in groups, and I think he's right. We are interdependent. Stack Sullivan explains this by saying that most individuals are approval seeking. That basically, if you look at a young child, caregiver appraisals of their behavior and actions will shape their self-concept. So let's say you have a child who is particularly gifted at art, but their parents want them to enter, let's say, the medical profession. The parents are going to shape the child's scientific interests and discourage the artistic interests, and that will cause confusion for the child and potentially moving away from an artistic self-concept. You also see this in positive ways, not just in negative dysfunctional ways, such as, let's say you're, again, a child, and you have some difficult behavior. You're aggressive at home, or maybe you're bullying at school. And parents often do a pretty good job at knowing that if we characterize a child as a bad egg, as a problem child, they're going to have that self-concept moving forward. And so instead of just deriding them for their behavior, we'll say things to them like, I know that you did this, but that's not who you are at core. I'm surprised that you did this. Those aren't values, right, that we have as a family. Or, best yet, you made a mistake, and it's now time for us to look at how we can fix it, how we can mend mistakes. So that kind of parenting helps children to develop a self-concept of being able to fix things and being able to make mistakes, and it not being a reflection of who they are at core. And so, in other words, again, the people around us shape who we are and what we think about ourselves. In adolescence, the shift moves from caregivers to peers. We become very interested in what our peers think of us, and we will kind of highlight aspects of ourselves that our peers like, and kind of downplay parts of ourselves that are disliked. And a real clear example of this would be if you look at a lot of cliques. Let's look at the athletic clique. Athletic cliques are often grounded in values of like toughness, hardiness, a stiff upper lip. And so, crying during a game or being very emotional, that may be discouraged in certain athletic, not by means athletic groups, but by some. And again, that will kind of shape us in how we interact with people, especially around topics of emotions. And that's part of the reason why men have such difficulty, by the way, with accessing, expressing emotions, because not just from family of origin, but also from peer group, it's kind of discouraged. I think the other way in which this is really evident in terms of how groups, if you will, how our social environment influences us, is when we look at addiction. With addiction, and this is a more clinical example, when I often worked with clients who were trying to recover from addiction, what often I found was that they had a real difficulty with letting go of their friendship group, people that they were using with. If you ask them, or tell them, you really have to move away from that group if you're going to, cut down on your use or maintain sobriety or whatever the goal was, the person would say, hey, I don't think I need to. I can hang out with my friends. I don't have to use. Well, the truth is, if you go hang out with the friends you've always been using with, they're going to expect the same behavior, have a certain role in that group, and it'll lead to relapse and use. And so we see this in addiction treatment a lot, that the social environment is very impactful on a person's ability to change behavior. And part of the reason we know this so well is that support groups are very important to a lot of people's long-term recovery from addiction. And I think the reason they are important is because it gives a person a new social structure of support that doesn't involve drugs. And that often is a major strength if you're going to try to change behavior around addiction. So I've described to you, I think, why the social environment is so important in how a person develops and the behaviors they manifest. Next, I'm going to move more towards group work, and I'm going to talk to you about how Yalom uses this idea of social influence and social learning when talking about how to operate as a group leader. Yalom has this very important concept in my mind, which is he talks about how mental disorders in and of themselves are not particularly useful to counselors and therapists. And I think he's right. I think to medical professionals, like for example psychiatrists, prescribers, where there's a specific medication that's given for a specific condition, it is very important. But I think overall, if you're doing counseling, often diagnosis can get in the way of a human contact and interaction. And I think Yalom is right when he talks about needing to translate mental disorders into interpersonal terms and to work on those in therapy. In my experience, there are two main reasons that a person goes to therapy. The first is the relationships, relational issues. The second has to do with forms of work, whether if they're a child or adolescent, it's academics, or if they're an adult, it's the workplace and career-related issues. And so being able to work through those will often remediate some of the symptoms that the client's demonstrating as a diagnosis. A good example of that being depressive symptoms, if the client feels stuck in a job or if they've just lost an important relationship. If you just target the depression without looking at the reason why they're depressed, you miss the point. I will also add that there are some clients where there's no major reason why they feel this way. Like there's no reason for panic attacks or depression or psychosis, it's just biological. And those clients are best served through psychopharmacology, through medication, not through psychotherapy necessarily. Though it may be somewhat useful as an adjunct, but that's not the core treatment. I'm talking here for more clients whose issues are more, you would consider them exogenous or environmental or related to the social environment. Okay, so I've talked a little bit about why group and why it's so important to look at interpersonal learning with group work. I'm going to next talk about what interpersonal learning looks like for different people in groups. Now, people need different things out of groups, different forms of interpersonal learning. For example, restricted individuals need catharsis, right? They need to be more expressive if they're numb. Dysregulated and impulsive individuals need more cognitive structure, be able to think before they make decisions, for example. In the same vein, a person who experiences narcissism needs to work on a need to share and give with others, whereas a person with low self-worth needs to learn how to ask for help, express needs, and frankly become a little bit more selfish, right? Have a balance there. Okay, so that's how interpersonal learning looks different with different clients. It's not all the same learning, okay? There's learning that happens, but it differs between clients. Now, last, I'm going to talk to you about self-disclosure and the Johari Window. This is a very useful framework for understanding how interpersonal learning can happen. There are 4 quadrants to the Johari Window, and the Johari Window is basically about a person's awareness and the group's awareness of issues. Okay? First quadrant, quadrant 1, is public or open knowledge. This is information that I would know as a group member, and the rest of the group would also know. A good example of this would be presenting problem. That I'm aware of the reason that I'm attending group, and I share that with the group, and everyone knows the reason that I'm there. Okay? That's public or open. Second quadrant is private or hidden knowledge. This is information that I know, but the rest of the group does not know about yet. Example being trauma that I'm not ready to talk about, shame, inadequacy, addiction, or may also be sexual attraction to other group members, which is awkward to talk about, right? And I will add, when I'm able to disclose those things, I often feel a sense of catharsis. Quadrant 3 is the blind quadrant. This is when the group knows something about me that I don't know about myself. Often you see this when the group pays close attention to your facial expression or some of your interpersonal interactions, like you always respond to one group member and avoid or ignore another group member, and you're not aware of doing that, but it's happening. And that helps you learn how you relate to others, right? And again, is very helpful for interpersonal learning. The last one is unknown. That's the last quadrant, the fourth quadrant, in that it's unknown, unconscious to you, and is unknown to the group. Often this pertains to things like family of origin issues that haven't been worked through, things that you're just unfamiliar with as of yet. So I've talked a little bit now about the role of the social environment, the role of the group and the group leader in facilitating that, and how the group can help us learn interpersonally. And that concludes this video lecture on interpersonal learning.